Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I have a fun card making tutorial for you. We're going to use a bunch of different materials, but the real cool thing I want to share with you today is how to marbleize paper using a water marbling technique. This video is brought to you by artandeco.com. I'm using stamps from them, and I will list the stamps I used in the video description so you can go find them if you are looking for some cool peacock or Asian themed rubber stamps. So the marbleizing technique is a lot of fun, and I was actually inspired because I was at the dollar store the other day and I saw a water marbling kit for just $1. And I figured, well, it's $1. What's the worst that can happen if it doesn't come out good? But it was really fun to use, and I thought this was a great way to get into it without spending a lot of money. So basically, when you're water marbleizing, you're going to need a dish or a tray that's a little bit, at least a little bit bigger than what you want to marble, and you're going to need some water. And if you are going to do, if you're using a big tray like this, then you could do several different marbling before you need to add more ink. So the inks I have here, this came with 6 colors, and you can spend a lot more and get, you know, from an art supplier and get some really, you know, more variety of color and bigger tubes. But you know, if you just want to try it out and not spend a ton of money, why don't you give this a try? So basically what this ink is, or this paint, whatever you want to call it, there really wasn't much for directions on the package. It's basically kind of an oily or greasy ink that will float on top of the water. So basically that's it. You just need something that's going to float instead of sink. So if you did this with acrylic paint, the acrylic paint would just mix in with the water. Same with watercolor. But if you have colors like this, they're going to just kind of sit on top, and that's what you want. And you know, I'm just using kind of a random assortment of crazy colors here. You can, you know, just use a couple to have more of a sophisticated look. I used blue, yellow, and green for the one on my card, but I thought it might be just kind of fun to get a little crazy with the colors. And if you're going to go on colored cardstock, you could use white. Otherwise, I don't think there's much need for the white, but I'll just put a little bit in there just for fun. Now, on its own, it is kind of cool looking, but to get that real marbled look, you're going to want to draw through it with something like a needle tool or a toothpick, something like that. I did pause the video because my furnace turned on, so we're back. I haven't done anything to this the surface here, and I'm just going to use a needle tool. I find the thinner tools work a little bit better for this. And I can draw lines through here and really get that marbling striation going. You don't want to mix it all up so it's one color, but you do want to get some interesting kind of marbly veining going on here. And then just do that until you're happy with the amount of kind of pattern you have going, and then what you want to do is have some pieces of cardstock that are all ready to go and just lay them right in the water. And with a tray this size, which is an 8x10 clear acrylic picture frame, I can get 2 quarter sheets of cardstock. And let's have a look here. Very interesting marbled effect. It'd probably look a little better if I had fewer colors, but I just kind of want to show you the colors in the kit. I did find they dried a lot lighter than what I was expecting, so just kind of keep that in mind if you're doing this. They're going to be a little bit paler when they dry. Sometimes you get some big clumps of ink that must not have been swirled very well, and there's still a little bit left up. I want to try to pull another print. I could give that a whirl and see what we get. It's not going to be very strong, but you can certainly get a few from that one application of ink. So this is going to take a while to dry. Mine took a couple hours to dry just on regular white cardstock. So you'll want to do this step a day before you're ready to do your card making. Okay, so the other papers that we just made are drying, and here's the one you can see that I have already dried. I had used blue, yellow, and green for this, so I've got a kind of analogous color theme going on here. I might have pronounced that wrong, but anyways, it's 3 kind of colors close to each other on the color wheel next to each other, and it gives you a very subtle look. So we're going to do some stamping right on this paper, and we're also going to do some stamping on this little bit of cardstock, and then I've got a black card base here ready to roll. So whenever you're doing any sort of heat embossing, it's really a good idea to dust it with some cornstarch or baby powder, and that's what I have sewn up in this little pouch here, some cornstarch. I'm just going to get both of these surfaces done right now so I don't so I don't forget. I tend to forget that step a lot. And that's basically just going to dry up anything. So if any of that ink or paint had a little bit of an oil to it that might cling to embossing powder, that's going to dry it up. It's also going to whisk any humidity out of the paper. So it's just a great step to take whenever you're doing any heat embossing. And the other tip that I have for you when you're doing heat embossing is to try to find a ink pad color that's pretty close to the color that you're going to be embossing with. So I'm going to be using a navy blue, so I am stamping with this really dark, well, it's a black, Onyx Black VersaFine ink. And that way, if you go with a color that's pretty close to your embossing powder, if the powder skips or doesn't behave perfectly, you're still going to have a nice image. You're going to be able to see the ink underneath. So that would be my little tip for you if you're heat embossing. Now you could use just clear embossing powder, absolutely, and that would probably work pretty well. I mean, that's what it's meant for, but I find that this just safeguards me in case I have like just a imperfect bit of embossing, like my powder doesn't cover everything. And this is kind of like a peacock, kind of an Art Deco peacock type of design. I'm going to cover it generously with this navy blue embossing powder. And don't worry, the excess can go right back in the container. I'm working on a scrap of paper so that I can dump that right back in. And then I'm just going to tap the back, and then I take a peek and I look and see if there's any stray marks, and if there is, I'll take a dry brush. It's got to be dry, a soft dry brush, and I'll just flick away any excess. Usually the powder, though, that we put on there beforehand takes care of that. And then all you need to do is heat set this. So as soon as you see your embossing powder start to go shiny, then you just move your heat tool along, and this will take about a minute. All right, when it's all shiny, you are good. And then what you want to do is grab the container that your embossing powder came in, and you just want to dump the rest of this back in the container. Whoa. Sometimes it takes a couple tries until you get it all back in there. And especially if you have a brand new thing of embossing powder, it almost seems like it duplicates as it's out of the jar. Sometimes it seems like you have more powder to get back in there. I think it's because all this air gets into it. So you want to put away the excess and cap it up so you don't spill it. These little containers are from Stampendous. I like them because you don't go through that much embossing powder. It really goes a long way. So those smaller jars are more convenient for me because I just don't go through that much of it. And I like to have a variety of colors. All right, so the next thing we're going to emboss is our little tag here. And here I'm going to stamp this feather, and since I'm going to do it with a kind of a metallic embossing powder, I'm going to stamp it down with a metallic ink. And I'm just using some kind of blue shiny ink, and this was just it's a blue ink that I got at Joann's many years ago in a set, but hey, it works great. So you could also use clear ink with this. I think if you use clear ink with this one, you actually might get a better effect because I think you get more of the holographic look. This is a hidden color satin. When you put it on, it looks white, and then when you heat it, it gets a really pretty sheen to it. Maybe I'll just go and dump that excess right off. There. That looks pretty good. Again, with a dry brush, if you see any, because this kind of has a little bit of a linen-y texture to it, if I see any stray bits of powder, I want to go ahead and brush that off, because once I heat it, it's going to be much more difficult to remove. And this really gives you kind of a wow factor when it heats, because you start to see that really pretty blue up here. You see that? Isn't that lovely? When you're working on a small piece like this, you might want to stop it and move it and grab it from the other end. You don't want to burn your fingers. Don't burn your hands off because it is really, really hot. This tool here is really hot. Definitely not a tool for kids to use. And then I'm just going to set that aside for right now, and I'm going to put the cap on this. Always cap up your embossing powder when you're not using it, otherwise it's really, really easy to spill. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is come up with some embellishments. I've got a piece of mulberry paper here, and the really cool thing about mulberry paper is that you can tear it and get this really nice deckled edge. And to get a good tear on mulberry paper, what I like to do is take a wet brush. You could just dip a brush in water. I'm using a water brush, but either way is fine. And I just wet where I want to tear it. So you could tear any shape you want. You can do a rectangle, a circle, a heart, whatever you want. But I just kind of want a border strip. So I'm just going to tear that there, and I can dry my paper with my heat tool really quickly, or I can just let it dry. It's completely up to you. Mulberry paper is a little more difficult to find these days, but often any place that sells like origami paper or Japanese paper, or even sometimes gift wrap, like a good stationery store ought to have it. It just adds a really nice texture to your cards. So here, I'm going to trim a little bit off this because I want to layer it on my black card base. And this is like a quarter sheet of cardstock, so it's not going to leave a border if I don't. So I need my little paper trimmer. And I'm just going to go ahead and I like to trim the edge of the stamped panel first, just to make sure I have everything squared up with that in case I was a little crooked when I stamped. It looks like I was pretty close on, so that's good. The thing I don't like about this this paper trimmer is it's not like super accurate, and you have to kind of guesstimate how much you need to trim off, and that I don't love, but it is kind of handy not to have to go over to my big trimmer, especially if I'm doing a video. So let's see how that looks matted up there. Oh, look at that. That's pretty even, so I think we're good. Now what I'm going to do is lay down some adhesive. You could also do a shaving cream marbleization technique. Sometimes when you do the shaving cream, it leaves like a kind of like a barrier on your paper because it's got a little bit of a waxiness to it. So just going to keep that in mind. I will be doing a tutorial where I show you that technique very shortly, so stay tuned for that. Not today, but coming up soon. But I think it's nice to know both ways, especially if you can get a kit for $1 just to give it a whirl. So the next thing I want to add for an embellishment is some metallic thread. I paid 60 cents for this on clearance or on sale. It's really nice, and a little goes a long way. So I personally really like this as an embellishment for any sort of Asian themed cards, or Art Deco even. It just has a really pretty, I think it gives a really pretty look. And I'm just going to wrap that around a couple times. I'm going to cross it in the middle so that I get a really, just kind of an interesting little design, and that will give me a nice little sparkle. And on the back I just hold it down with a piece of cellophane tape. Probably not the most acid-free thing to use a cellophane tape, so you could use like if you're worried about this lasting for ages and ages, you could use an artist tape if you prefer, but I'm not thinking people are keeping my cards for ever and ever, so I just go with the regular stuff. Now I'm going to use some of my classic foam squares. You guys know these foam squares if you've been watching my channel for any period of time, because they came from a puzzle, like a 3D puzzle that the kids had done and had all these foam squares left over. And hey, waste not, want not. These suckers are the best because they don't seem to fall off. Like I've bought foam squares for crafting, and then I've had like my card fall apart, and that's no good. Alright, I just love this new set from Art & Deco. These peacocks are just so pretty. I used a set the other day too. I just really like it. Now these are really fun. These are just little gems. I picked them up at a stamp show from Outlet, and they remind me of like those raspberry beads that you kind of might have had when, I don't know, they're really popular in the 70s and 80s, I think. I remember crafting with them. So I can do that. On this one, I left a little bit bigger of a border, and I did some skinny rhinestones there, but I'm just wondering if I might want to just do it a little bit differently here and put maybe 4 of these and balance them around that design. So, depending on how wide you make your mulberry strip and how you put different things, you may rearrange where you put your other embellishments. So I'm thinking maybe 3 in the center here would look nice, and I might copy that over on the other side. I don't know where I got these. I'm sure a craft store somewhere. They're kind of funny though. These little guys have like, there's like a long strip connecting them, and I don't really like that because I feel like it sticks out a lot. Like, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's like a strip of adhesive. It's like one long strip connecting all of these, which I guess would be handy if you're making a design that you're trying to like follow a line or something. I don't know if you're just like, maybe you don't want to put them down piece by piece, but I don't like seeing that strip of adhesive in the middle personally, so I'm trying to tear that little piece off. You could cut it off, but tearing's a little bit easier. But yeah, same idea as the other card. I just went a little bit differently with my rhinestone placement. Ooh, and I got some of that adhesive on the front, so yeah. Oh, or I pulled some off the back. Oh, I pulled the adhesive off the back. That's what I did. These are not the highest quality. These ones right here, I think they're probably in a bargain bin somewhere, but it's still nice to use them up. I like to have a little bling. Okay, so now the only thing left to do is to adhere it onto my card base. The cardstock that I like to use for my card bases is the Recollections 110 pound, which is heavier than the 110 pound of like Georgia Pacific for some reason. I think maybe that's cover weight versus a cardstock weight, I'm not sure, but I really like this. I don't find as much use for the black as I do the cream and white, but I do like it on the like any sort of Art Deco themed cards. I probably should have stuck this down before I put my rhinestones on. It would have been easier to run that glue runner on the back. And I didn't balance my rhinestones out perfectly. I'm gonna see if I can adjust them a little bit. Hopefully the adhesive is strong enough to still stay stuck afterwards. Oh, but there you go. I think it's a lot of fun. Here are these other little marbled pieces that I did. They're very subtle. Like I said, they kind of fade as they dry. I'll show you like the first generation here. This is wet still, so you can kind of get an idea of how much it's going to shift. I don't know if that's typical for all marbleized paper, water marbleized paper, or if it's just because this is a cheap kit I got at the Dollar Tree, but just to kind of give you an idea. This was the second generation marbling that I did in the tray at the beginning of the video, and this is probably going to be super pastel when it's dry. But just to give you an idea, the water marbleization technique does look a little bit more subtle than the shaving cream marbleization, so if you want that more subtle look, give this a try. You might even be able to do it with like your pigment inks, because that's probably got a little bit of an oil to it, and it will probably float on your water. So try it with what you have. If you don't have it, then if you got a Dollar Tree nearby, you might be able to pick up this little kit here and do it yourself. Please check out our sponsor, artneco.com. I will put links in the video description so you can find the stamp sets that I used, and they have a lot of other good stuff too. And mention the Frugal Crafter and you can save 10% on your order, or get free shipping if your order's over 50. So you'll get the deal that is better. They always make sure that they give you the best deal. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy crafting.